Welcome back, everyone. My name is Adam Soroka. I am Managing Director for Cavendish Group. On our second day of Future Energy Systems, we've had a brilliant start to the day with Iberdrola, a fantastic panel as well on regulation, and a really brilliant, insightful presentation from Xanthi Bennett from Expleo as well. So we've had a really cracking start, and we're going to continue that brilliant start with a absolutely stupendous panel. One of my favourite topics really of all of this sort of change management we're dealing with, specifically on people, process and technology. I think it's definitely one of the most underrated things as we all move towards a digital world. So the panel is actually called People, Process and Technology versus Technology, Process and People. I've sort of done it in reverse because sometimes we probably need to establish what comes first within those three words. So how to redefine workforce objectives. It's moderated by the brilliant Gianluca Galletto, who is former Managing Director at Innovation Partnerships, Office of the Chair for New York City Housing Authority. So really looking forward to this one, and over to you, Gianluca.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Adam, for the brilliant. I appreciate it. Can you hear me properly? I want to make sure because I see myself a little slow. Can you hear me?
Yes, sounds okay, Gianluca.
Okay, perfect. Sorry about that. Yes, thank you. And just a very quick introduction about myself, and then I will ask the panelists to do a brief introduction of themselves. I'm former managing director of the Housing Authority. Just it's pretty recent. I joined and as a startup that works in the urban development field. I am originally Italian, so I can say I can feel European. I don't know there in the UK if you still feel like that. I hope. And I've been working in technology and innovation for the last at least 10 years. Before I'm a Wall Street recovering person, and I've been dealing mostly with everything that relates to the change and that is happening today. In the last, actually, I would say it's been going on for the last 30 years, but I think there's been a tremendous acceleration in the last few. And the effect of technology on, in my case before, was on how to use technology to improve housing, but it's really the effect of technology on the future of how work is going to be organized, and also in general, the impact on people. And since we're talking about energy, I think it's critically important to say that for the last 2 years, I really focused extremely on decarbonization especially of the housing stock. We have 177,000 apartments in New York City. It's the largest. 450,000 people work there, and so I would like to touch on those subjects to see how this intersect with the main topic of the conference. With that said, I would say I would just like. We're going to talk about the first topic would be really trying to see how we can avoid siloed working culture within organizations, and how technology can help. Or, in my opinion, sometimes it creates problems. Sometimes more problems than what it solves. That's my personal opinion with the experience I have. So I will give the floor to the panelists. I will start with Christianna to briefly introduce yourself, and then say what you think about, at least starting with this, the general topic, and then the specific area of siloed cultures.
Thanks. So yes, I'm Christianna Logan. I'm the Director of Customers and Stakeholders for SSEN Transmission, part of the SSE Group. And we own and operate the electricity transmission network in the north of Scotland. And in my area, we work with our customers and stakeholders to deliver a network for net zero and the decarbonisation agenda, and to make sure that we're delivering that in the best interests of society. And within that, we do think a lot about our own people and our employees as well. So a lot of what I say today will be around that, the impact of technology on our people, as well as on our customers and general consumers in the energy system. In terms of this topic, I think it's a really interesting one. Like many organisations, we found ourselves working in this kind of hybrid environment now, where we are enabled by technology to be able to work virtually and digitally. But we have definitely felt that over the last 2 years, we have had an increase in this kind of siloed working, where people are working more within their teams and not so much between teams, with less collaboration going on. I think we've really missed those kind of water cooler conversations where teams that don't necessarily work on the same processes within their day-to-day are getting in touch with each other and finding that they do have common interests, or that they can learn from each other's experiences. So we are working on ways to do more of that digitally, but I think that's balanced with actually trying to bring people back together in person to have those opportunities for innovation and that kind of creative collaboration that we haven't seen as much of. And I think this point around, what is going to be the driver of that? Is it technology or is it people? My perspective is ultimately it's about the people. Because even if you have the best technology, if the people don't adopt it and use it, then you won't receive the benefits of it. So it's about figuring out how we can get the right technologies, but ones that people are engaged with and people will actually use. And that's particularly where we have new people coming into our organisation that don't necessarily have established networks across the business or across the industry. It's harder for them when they're working digitally to figure out who are the right people to ask. So what we are looking into is better solutions for that kind of networking approach, and how we can bring people together to meet each other digitally. And actually, involvement in things like these conferences is a great opportunity for that, to find new contacts across the sector, and to be able to then use those that in a way that we used to do face to face. And that should help us to adopt less siloed working. And particularly important when we think about deployment of digital programs and operational technology programs. We're spending almost £80 million on these programs over the next 5 years. And unless our digital teams are working closely with our customer teams, our operations teams, and our kind of project delivery teams, then the technologies that they implement, the sort of systems and services they deliver, might not actually meet the needs that those teams have. So bringing those teams together is absolutely essential to success in this area.
Thank you very much. It's very insightful, and also, I personally agree with all you said. I just wanted to mention what I wrote in an email between our panelists, circle among our panelists, that recently I saw a brief, it was a video, I think, on YouTube on some Steve Jobs giving a speech. Somebody criticized him. I'm talking about like early 90s. And he said something that resonated with me all the time, and I just refreshed it, is that a lot of time technology is designed by people who love technology, or even companies, startups, etc. But then first they find the technology, then they go look for the problem. And instead, it's always the opposite. You have to start from the human experience and then work backward towards what the product is going to be to solve that and the problem, and then make the human experience better. So with that, I would like to have also Filipe Mota da Silva to introduce himself and just speak about this. And it's from Tata Consulting Services. Filipe, you there? Filipe? Filipe is frozen.
Oh no.
All right, let's do this. Let's move to until Filipe is unfrozen. I'd like to ask then Ivan Ericsson from Expleo Group to introduce and say his thoughts.
It's very tempting to pretend to freeze right now, but I won't. I'll let you so
if you want,
very nice. So Ivan Ericsson, I'm the Director of Quality Management within Expleo Group. So for 23 years now, I've worked for the same company. Started off doing testing and test management. Very quickly realized you can't test quality into something. You can only test for a level of quality. The way that you improve things is by really having that quality perspective. So we've spent a lot of time over the last 30 or 40 years as an organization helping our customers to really improve the quality of what they produce. I've done a fair amount of work in energy and utilities. So we work with a lot of the big E&U companies to implement smart metering. We've also done a fair bit of work with DCC and with other organisations around the kind of the infrastructure of energy and utilities. But that's about the limit of my expertise in energy and utilities. What I can bring is knowledge of other sectors. So I've worked within aerospace, within retail, within finance. I run, or my team runs a number of large programs for a number of large organisations. So I think there's some very interesting learnings in that space. Running a consultancy, siloed delivery is something that I'm really concerned about, because all of my team are distributed up and down the country, sometimes internationally, doing lots and lots of different types of work for customers. And I need to make sure that they are working collaboratively together to bring their collective expertise to their customers. So it's always been something that I've really focused on, is avoiding siloed delivery and maximizing the opportunity to innovate and collaborate and really work together. And I think, as Christina said, with COVID over the last few years, that's only been made worse. Instead of people being isolated at customer sites, they're isolated at home. And so we've had to kind of double down on our efforts to really understand what the blockers for siloed delivery are, understand what causes that, and then counter it. So hopefully I've got some interesting thoughts on that. And I want to talk about an octopus later on, because for me, the octopus represents unsiloed delivery, and more and more everything I talk about comes back to that octopus. So don't be surprised if that appears. In terms of the people versus technology, there was a customer we worked with a few years ago that creates aeroplane engines. I won't name them, but they're a very big organization, and in their construction factory, which is about a mile long, and they start at one end with a box of components, and then it moves along and they plug extra bits and pieces in until every 24 hours a multi-million-pound engine goes out the door and gets plugged onto an aeroplane. And we help them to implement a system for digitizing that process. So instead of having a book that you tick and say, I've done that, you've got a computer screen that you tick on to say, I've done that. So it's meant to make things quicker and safer and more reliable. So we did a lot of work with them implementing that system, and it was deployed, and it was there in each of the workstations as their own little system to use. And I remember doing a tour of the factory, and the first thing I saw was one of these portals with a book on top of it, as the user was reading the book still. So, and I think, again, to Christina's point, you can have the whizziest technology in the world. If the people don't buy into it and they don't understand it and they don't want to use it, then it undermines all of the investment and all of the strategic direction that you want to put in play. So for me, technology, great, but you need the people and the buy-in and the culture and the octopus, I'll come back to that, that really drives through the implementation of these things. And so I'm really happy to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Even. And next one will be David Hartell, or Hartell, just correct me if I'm wrong. He's Managing Director of Stellae and Energy.
Yeah, thanks,
yours.
Gianluca. Thank you. Yeah, I've been working in delivering energy-related facilities and operations for a long time. The first part of my career was oil and gas all over the world, and the last 2 years have been renewable energy systems. Technology is always a little bit seductive. Everybody wants the latest technology. We have good technologies and tools, but a lot of times the implementation has failed because it's not just some shiny, nice box you bolt on the wall and it solves all your problems. It has to be connected into the people, and the idea that technology shouldn't be necessarily replacing people. It should be augmenting people. And not just people, but as we've heard from the earlier panelists, the silos and stuff. There's been various major international energy companies that had facilities and a lot of data came out of that facility, but then it got split off and went to different parts of their organization, and even in different geographical locations, and they didn't coordinate, so you didn't have holistic solutions. So we've always tried to do things we call multidiscipline agile teams, close to the asset, that representing different parts of the organization, but working together could be closer to the problems, but also quicker, more responsive to make solutions and to better use the technology. And the guys that have failed have had older style hierarchical decision making. Everything went up for somebody else to decide, and individual groups were making individual decisions that went up, so they weren't coordinated. So we're trying to simplify workflows to have a better culture, and those are the guys that are more successful. That's where we've seen more success out in the field. So hopefully we'll talk some more about this a little bit later in the panel. Thank you.
Hi, I'm back. I needed to see the charger there if it's working. So thank you very much, Dave. Bryan Hill from Microsoft.
Hello. Good morning,
I want to
everyone.
hear you.
So I'm very well, thank you. So my role at Microsoft, and I've been here about 6 years, is what's known as a client technology lead. So I look after some of our big energy customers in the UK, including SSE. So I'm really managing the overall technology relationship between Microsoft and my customers. But that often bleeds over into how technology is used, how technology is adopted, and really getting the benefits of that. We don't want people to buy things and never use them. We really want them to get the business benefits out of doing it. In terms of avoiding siloed working cultures, I'm a great believer in people talking to people across different departments, across different parts of the organization. I think when people sit down with others and understand what they do, what their challenges are, it does break down those barriers and builds in that level of kind of empathy and understanding. So, back office people going out into the field, understanding what people are doing day to day, field workers getting exposure what's happening in the back office, I think is tremendously important. And I think that with COVID and with more remote work, we absolutely have lost a lot of opportunity to do that. And not just field to office workers, but within the offices. Teams that you work and collaborate with shouldn't be just an email address that you send something to. It should be people that you can talk to, and you know what will help them, and you know how to help them be effective, as well as yourself be effective. So for me, encouraging collaboration and information sharing is something that all organizations have really put an effort into. And I think that avoiding competition between different teams is something to be aimed for as well. I think within Microsoft, we do look at and measure how well people collaborate and how well people help others, but also build on the work of others. And it's an organization where it's very very open, very discussive, very collaborative, but it is being driven by those measures. On the question of technology versus people, I'm coming down on the side of people as well. As Christianna said, the best technology in the world, if it's not getting used, it doesn't actually achieve anything. We really encourage organizations that are adopting new technologies to put as much effort into bringing their people with them, training them, making them aware of the benefits. And if it's not right for them, doing something about it. A lot of field teams are issued with all of this wonderful technology, but it's not really been built with them in mind. They haven't been involved in the development of it. So where you are looking to roll out new technology to teams that are going to be using it, it's absolutely key to ensure that the people are involved in the how that technology is built, how that's implemented, and is of benefit to them rather than being a hindrance.
Thanks. I take that there's basically a common thread here, being that everybody agrees on the fact that people need to be prioritized in this case, or at least like looking at how, the way they adopt it, if they adopt it, but also if this actually solves problems within the organization. And I'd like to I'm deviating a little bit from part of the other questions, but I want to ask just briefly if you have some examples, because everybody talked about it's making the people in the organization adopt. How do you do that? Do you have an example that been successful in doing in achieving that, or like, I don't know, not a failure sometimes? What went wrong, or what was right instead? That would be, I think, very interesting.
Yeah, Gianluca,
anyone wants to-
what we've seen in our industry that when people have tried to roll out pilot programs with new technology, 70 to 80% of these pilot programs have failed. And the ones where they've been successful, the people that were successful spent more than 50% of the costs on working on the people side, the culture, how they structure their organization. This thing I mentioned before, the multidiscipline agile teams. How do you work on the organization of your people to communicate? Better interaction between those people. Those are the guys where these pilot programs succeeded. But people that just focused on the technology side, 70 to 80% of them failed.
Anyone else has an opinion on this? Opinion, fact.
I'll call you out a specific example if you like. So quite
Yes.
a few years back, we attempted to roll out tablets to our operational field-based teams to help them with reporting data back into the business. And it was when our technology rollout team went out to meet with some of the field teams, kind of what Bryan was saying about, go out and actually work with these teams. And they found the tablets gathering dust in the back of vans. And everyone was still using the paper sheets because they could just take the paper sheet and hand it to someone else and the data would go into the system and they didn't have to worry about it. They found it easier. They didn't have to navigate through the systems on the tablets. It did not land. And that was an example of an ineffective rollout. Since then, we've taken two different approaches. A lot of that data is now automatically read and then sent back to our data systems without any involvement from the people at all. So some of that data has been completely automated, which of course was easier for the people because they didn't even have to fill in the paper form. So they were very happy to adopt that approach. On some of the things where we don't have that level of telemetry, they actually are using mobile phone based systems to actually submit that data now, because these teams were much more comfortable with using their phones, that something they do in their own personal lives as well as professionally. So it was something they did carry with them, as opposed to a heavier tablet that they were going to have to start carting about and bring it in and out of the van. So that's a way where something that wasn't successful, we were able to reassess, think about why it hadn't worked, and then adopt new approaches that actually did suit the people that were involved.
Thank you. That's interesting. I don't know if anyone has any other thing to say about it. Otherwise, we will move forward. But anyone else?
I just have one more. Like a lot of organizations, we've tried to implement reporting solutions that get data from a number of different sources and produce simple dashboards that are designed to direct effective management decisions. What we've found over the first few implementations, and this is going back quite a long way, was that the actual project to implement the technology is nowhere near as important as understanding why you want it, getting the baseline, getting the data model in place in the first place. And so we've done a lot of work over the recent years to really rectify that. And you heard from my colleague Xanthi Bennett earlier on, and she is really bringing some rigor and discipline around the way that we deal with data, and we work with our customers around data. And it's really changed the way that we implement solutions like that now, that we really focus on getting the right data model in place early, mapping that to the customer need and the value stream, so that when the tool is implemented, it's actually just implementing the value stream that's required rather than implementing a technical implementation of a tool. So it's really driven by people and data rather than a technical process implementation, if that makes sense.
Thank you. It reminds me a little bit of the electoral machines here in the States. I mean, they vary a little bit by state, but it's generally like here in New York, we use a sheet that you with some you write little, you circle a little circle that is related to a candidate, and then it's scanned to a machine, and it's a little get. Before you used to have this weird machines, and I always thought in Italy instead, we still use a paper, and at the end of the day, the time to get the result was probably faster there. And that's something is a little bit baffling to me. And it's one of the example of, you have this, machines are supposed to give you an instant reading of who won, who lost, but it actually, you have a lot of problems. And as you know, you've seen it, on the news. So let's move to another topic that's still like within this area. Talk about sustainability, performance, and of course, mitigating costs. So is it culture management that you think that is really the critical aspect of how to achieve is better performance? And again, we're talking about sustainability, that one too, because of course behavior and how much people believe in something they're doing, I think, has a lot to do with this. So I will go back to Christianna first, and then we'll follow the original list. Christianna, what do you think?
Well, do you know, actually, when I read this question, I thought it was maybe someone was reading my mind, because this is a really live topic for us at the moment as an executive team. So in SSE, we have a set of core values that include sustainability, service, excellence, and efficiency, alongside safety and teamwork. And right now, the energy decarbonisation is requiring massive growth in our organisation. So our part of the electricity network in the UK is currently at the scale of 8 gigawatts, and that's expected to grow to 40 gigawatts by 2035 and potentially around 50 gigawatts by 2050. And that's to enable us to provide 10% of GB decarbonisation goals. So we're committed to delivering that growth in a way that is efficient, that maintains the excellent standards of service that our connected consumers have come to expect. They get 99.999% reliability right now, and we don't want to compromise that as we grow. So historically, these values have been very much a part of our culture, what drives that performance. But the growth that we're going through means we're bringing in a huge number of new people into our organisation. So over the last 2 years, our number of employees has doubled, and it's going to grow by the same amount again over the course of this year. So by the end of this year, 2/3 of our organisation will have been with us for less than 3 years. And many of those people will have joined during the kind of lockdown period where they were working remotely and digitally. And that did mean that they weren't as immersed in our culture as people normally are when they come in and work within our offices and on our sites. So for us, we are looking at how we can work to re-immerse people in that culture, to actually build a program of engagement, not just for the onboarding and bringing people into the organisation, but also refreshing that with the people that have joined over the last few years, so that we don't end up with our culture being diluted and seeing that, in fact, some of those values are not sitting at the top of people's priorities as they were before. I think when you bring that into the technology space, there are, of course, ways that we can, remotely connect with people to do things like, online conferences for our employees and bringing people together that way. We're doing more creative internal communications and using, more video platforms and things like that to help demonstrate the culture. But it's also about the way we talk about the things that we're doing and the reasons we're implementing them. So if I took, for example, our new sustainability reporting app, people could look at that and say, all right, this is about reporting, this is about compliance, this is about data. But actually, it's about sustainability, it's about teamwork with our supply chain, and it's about ensuring that we're meeting the expectations of our stakeholders that expect those high standards on things like environmental performance, and us paying the living wage and these other types of social sustainability factors that we report on. So I think there's a lot that can be done in terms of the way we talk about what we're doing in the digital and technology space, and the reason that we have certain processes in place that help people to understand that these are deployments of our culture and help build and reinforce that culture as we grow, rather than end up with it being diluted.
Thank you. Very interesting. I just realized that I didn't give a chance to Filipe to chime in also on the previous subject, because at the beginning it was frozen. Filipe, are you there? Can you hear us now? Filipe? Filipe? Oh, I don't know. Filipe? I think it's some problem with the.
Hello?
Oh, hi. Couldn't hear you. Did you hear us? You freeze all the time, Filipe. I don't know. Anyway, I think can you hear us now?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Did you hear what we said? Like,
Can you hear me?
because I said I didn't give you a chance to speak, because at the beginning we were frozen, so I had to move forward, to the next
Yes,
speaker.
I heard. Yeah.
Oh, can you also chime in? And if you want to add something about the previous subject too, because you haven't, I can give you giving you the chance to speak.
Sure. Apologize for for my technology, and I think this is an interesting case that we're talking about people, process, and technology. I think just on the previous topic, just probably two areas that I could help this conversation. One is really when our organization looks at working with other clients around a particular area. We think about a particular has 4 different technology, people, processes, and data, and you do have to have them at the same aid to make it stable. So I think that the question is always, when you start to build the table, is where it comes first. And I can't disagree with any of my fellow panelists that it really starts with the people, and more than ever, given the current environment, and Christianna was mentioning, with COVID, with the hybrid workplace, there is a huge potentially now to not only understand that we need to eliminate some of the silos that were created because people are working in a very siloed, independent way, but actually starts to create a culture of moving this change to a more ecosystem-based culture where everyone is actually interacting with so many different stakeholders in the business. So I think there is clearly here a huge case of people, and I think when you mentioned about some of the case studies we work on, one of the things we work very closely with clients, especially in large digital transformation implementations, is not only immerse people on day one, but actually starts emerging people on the first piece when you think about designing, what would look like the future of the workplace, or the new, ERP transformation that you're going into implement. And a lot of companies are still thinking about, we want to immerse people on day one. and we are trying to recreate, the mindset, because if you just immerse that on day one of where you start, the implementation or the beginning of the transformation, you're already probably losing, that immersive experience when it comes to the design. And as other examples I could bring to the table, sometimes companies really invest a lot on the technology up front, on a new ERP system, and then you spend even more money than you should actually when it comes to the change management piece or the training piece, because people don't know how to use it, and you lose some of the digital inclusion peer. So I think that's pretty much what I would say on the first question. So coming just back to the sustainability piece, and how to improve sustainability performance and mitigating costs, I do feel that it's quite important to address this particular area of data, right? And I think what Christina was mentioning about, it's really important to have this data driven mindset. And one of the things we also try to look at is every time we actually talk with people about being a data driven organization, we lose a lot of stakeholders in the process, because some of the elements of in the organization think, if you are becoming a data driven organization, do we actually need the people to make the decisions? So I think we need to kind of also shift debate by, instead of being a data-driven organization, can we start, talking about being a data-informative organization, and bring the people who actually have the contextual knowledge and the experience to really make the decisions that will be relevant, particularly in this very sensitive topic that is, because the journey is a continuous journey. So we need more than the people are immersed and they have the cycles of enthusiasm to drive the decisions in the right manner and achieve the right results.
Thank you, Filipe. Just want to remind you that I realize we have half hour, so maybe I want to go fast, because I'd like to keep a little bit of time for a couple of at least questions from the audience. So just like maybe everybody can chime in, like Evan first, and then David, and then Bryan.
Yeah, happy to. So there's a few things here. One, I'm not a great fan of the culture, the idea of culture management. I don't think you can manage culture. I think you can lead culture. I think you can enable culture, but not manage culture, because you see it as a project or a management activity. It tends to die, which brings me back to my concept of the octopus. So I think the culture is an organization, and an organization needs to be like an octopus. It needs to be able to move in a number of different directions at once. It needs to be able to experiment. It needs to be able to try things out. It needs to be able to be entrepreneurial and innovative and interactive and collaborative and supportive, and all of that needs an environment in which to survive. And our job as leaders of an organization is to create the big glass house in which an octopus can survive, because if it doesn't have the right water and the right temperature and the right space and the right food, then it will fail. So it's not about management in my mind, it's about leadership. Culture leadership and establishing that culture has to come first, because that will enable sustainability and performance and cost, but also lots of other things. So it will enable opportunity identification. So your culture is your organization, and that's where opportunities are identified. If we look at things like Blockbuster, when they were coming to the end of people getting videotapes out and kind of streaming was starting, they had the opportunity to buy Netflix for what would have been a tiny amount of money. They chose not to, and now Netflix is far bigger than Blockbuster ever was. And that was a decision that could have been made by a responsive, reactive, embracing change organization that wasn't made, and Blockbuster is no more as a result of it. So it's about creating a culture of innovation, of challenge, of questioning, of curiosity and diversity, and that can't be managed. That can just be enabled and led and supported.
I tend to agree with you on this, but that's just my personal opinion. So David and Bryan also.
Sure.
David.
Sure. No, I agree with a lot of things Ivan said. I think leaders have to help support what's going to be the philosophy of the organization, what's the values that are important to the organization, and support things that are going to go on below them. But if they maintain this hierarchical thing where everything has to go up several levels, and that's going to reduce the responsiveness, take longer time to make some of these changes. So empowering and delegating stuff farther down as much as you can is really important. The other thing that really struck me over the past 2 years with COVID, I think a few others on the panel have touched on this earlier, is working from home and not being able to have face-to-face with teams. There's a concept called synchronous versus asynchronous communication. So synchronous is when you're all in the same place, or you're in very routine, regular, extensive face-to-face kind of communication, and people are expressing ideas and challenges and solutions back and forth. That was a model that worked very well for humans. But with the virtual world, where people only periodically touch base, you have the occasional face-to-face meeting on Zoom. It's a virtual meeting. You send emails to people, you send texts. That's been a real challenge for organizations to succeed. And I know Apple did a very big survey of all their workforce and everything, and found that they were really hurt by asynchronous communications. I think Elon Musk has pitched in on this and wants to get people back to the office. But I think primarily it's to get better creative interaction between people. And so, leadership has to recognize this, that if we're going to have the challenges of asynchronous communication, how do we improve those? How do we make stuff, as Christianna talked about with her workforce? How do you make people feel more inclusive and understand what it is? What are these philosophies? What are these values? How are they supported from above? To make sure that people don't diverge, start coming up with their own individual ideas that's not really well aligned with the organization's principles. I think this is the challenge for leaders, is to spot these kind of things, and to make sure that they're working hard to keep the message, keep being responsive for your customers, keep listening to your customers better. And then I think you could be more successful. If you don't do that, you're going to fade away, like the Blockbuster example. Thanks.
Thank you. Bryan.
I'd like to talk a little bit about changing culture within an organization. I think within the energy industry, certainly the customers that I work with, they have a long history, and they have very proud cultures, and it's served them really well over the past 20, 30, 40 years. I think with the challenges we have around the energy industry and the drive towards net zero, decarbonisation, electrification, there's so much more that needs to be done in a far shorter time. So over the next 10 years, we're going to see so much change within that energy industry compared to the past kind of 30, 40 years. So in order to deliver that change, the culture of these organizations will need to evolve. It's not a case of changing it wholesale, because there is a huge amount of value in what's there already, but certainly taking some time to look at how organizations operate, how people communicate, how people work together, and then being able to influence in the direction that you want your culture to go. So I think, as an example, I was within an organization that was very siloed, that was very desk-based. And with a new leadership coming in, they wanted really to encourage collaboration. And the changes they put in place, as well as kind of talking about what they wanted to achieve, were very much in the physical. So they took away set desks. They took away, defined working patterns. But what they put in place was very positive. They put in a lot of open collaboration areas. They put in a lot of coffee shops. And people then naturally gravitated towards having more of those informal conversations, and actually created more of a collaborative organization through the physical changes that were put in place. And they were seen as a positive by the workforce. And so, I think we've probably all seen cultural initiatives that don't amount to much more than a few posters and a few statements. It's actually what you put in place and how you help your people that will actually drive that change in culture.
Thank you very much. So basically, I hear also another common thread is that you all more or less touched on leadership as a critical element, whether you believe or not in changing in managing culture, or at least like changing it, or like push it into some directions, or nudge it, let's say. So, what do you think that leadership then should look like these days to make this happen? And what is your opinion? I'm going to mix the order now, because maybe it makes it more fun. I'm not sure, but we'll see. So I will ask then Filipe maybe to start on this. You there?
I think you touched a really important
Okay,
point.
so
On leadership.
let's have Ivan. Oh, you're there. Sorry. I thought you said that you weren't. No, I'm sorry about that. Sorry. Go ahead. I didn't hear.
Yeah, so I think from a leadership point of view, you touched a really important point here, and as I mentioned, previously, I think companies that are really trying to digitally transform, they really must change employees, hearts, the way they actually do their work, their hats, and the way they actually see, how their work are actually impacting the organization and the society. And last but not least, their hands and how they do, exactly the era where there's a lot of new adoptions coming into place, how leaders can bring this empathetic side and try to, to stress and bring these employees together to grapple the complexity and the change that comes with digital transformation. And I think that's quite critical, that no longer, and I think we mentioned about, examples of how other companies quite extincted, but I think that's also going to happen with leadership. I think some of the leaders that made it in the past probably will not make it in the future, because the type of skill sets you probably need today on the leadership to embrace all this change are completely shifted. So empathetic, being empathetic, being curious, but also having this capacity
Filipe,
bring others together.
we're having a very hard time listening, hearing you. Sorry, I gonna be like a hard, like when they're doing TV on TV. Can you? We'll move to the next. Let's see if something. Bryan wants to say something about this, and then I guess I'll go back maybe later to Filipe.
Yeah, I guess
Bryan.
in response to the question around what makes effective leaders, I mean, I wrote down 3 words. I've added another one just now. So consistency in the messaging, in how that leadership is done, and then honesty. So, I think it really speaks for itself that we all want our leaders to be honest. Openness about what's happening within an organization, openness about successes, openness about failures, and then empathy and understanding. I think the days of the kind of the old school manager, the barking leader, the C-suite that you would be frightened to approach should be over. Our leaders need to be as open and approachable as everyone else within the organization. And we have 3 leadership principles. First is around bringing clarity to co-workers and your team. So helping them understand the organizational goals, helping them understand what they are meant to be achieving, and also generating energy. So generating energy within your own team, but also across the company, because we, again, leaders are a model for the organization. They're a model for their teams. And if we want our teams to be energetic and active, leaders need to be very, very similar. And then also, really fundamentally, it's about delivering success. So understanding what the goals of your particular team are, understanding how they fit into the organization, and then working with your team to deliver on those particular goals. And it's a shared ownership. It's a shared goal across a whole organization, or across a department, or across a team. So the success of everyone should be interlinked.
So very, very quickly, because I want to move to the next final topic, because I think it's going to be very important. So Ivan and Christianna, I think, or Dave, Ivan first, and I think I'm
Okay.
not sure if Dave talks.
Fine. I'd actually written 5 points down in answer to this, and then when Bryan said he had 4, I thought he's going to steal all of my points, but you didn't, Bryan. That's fine. But they're actually overlapping, which is good. So the first point I want to make is about learning. So leaders need to learn, and leaders need to learn continuously, because there's always different challenges and there's always different opportunities. And so by learning, you put yourself and your organization in a really good place to take advantage of that. So I did a course on leadership a couple of years ago, and there's some things that I picked up on that course that have really stuck with me. One is around vision and purpose. So one of the most difficult questions I was asked was, what is your purpose? And my purpose isn't to run a business or to earn a salary. The purpose needs to be something deeper than that. And I think having a purpose and a vision tied into one another, and to Bryan's point, that you relate with clarity and continuously relate with clarity to really embed, I think is critical. I like the analogy of you can't really work out where a dance is going if you're on the dance floor. You need to be in the balcony. So you need to, as a leader, find some time to step above it all and look down and observe what's happening and trends and direction of travel. The next one is around empowerment. So it's one of my weaknesses, and I'm fighting it, which is getting other people to do things that I could do. So I'm tempted all the time to jump in and do things, because I know that people won't do them exactly the way I want them done, or that I would do them. But that's self-defeating. So I'm teaching myself to empower, to curate more than create. And I think that's one of the key skills of leaders. Also, prioritization. I have a regular challenge of the things I can do, the things I want to do, and the things I need to do. And really understanding prioritization should drive me to the things that I need to do. And to my point earlier about data and metrics, having the data to back it up. So I'm not just doing what I think needs to be done, I'm doing what I can prove needs to be done. And I've got the data to back that up, because that helps me to underpin the vision and the purpose. And the last point I'll make on this is that, and it comes to a point we made on the last section, is unless we're working together and we're visible leaders, then I really fear for some of the younger people who've joined the workforce in the last few years, because they've been doing so remotely and they don't get the water cooler moments or the sitting across the desk and the chats. So I think as leaders, we really need to focus on bringing those younger people with us, so that they are getting the experience of listening to us, of working with us, and understanding us, because if they don't, then their ability to be doing our jobs in 5, 10, 15 years time will be undermined. So that was it for me.
Thank you. Just we only have 12 minutes left, so I want you to, Christianna and Dave, if you can be, I'm sorry, but a little bit very brief on this, and then because I want to touch the last topic on artificial intelligence.
Gianluca, I think it's mostly been said.
Okay.
I would sum it up. Leaders need a soft front and a strong back. So I think that's the gist of what everyone's been saying. And stay humble. You are always learning. So stick with that.
Dave?
Yeah, I like a lot of the things we've heard today. I think inspiration from a leader is very important. Just directing directive. You must do this. That's not going to inspire people. We have a lot of technologies and tools which are increasingly becoming part of how we do our work, and we need to reassure the workforce and get them to embrace these and contribute their ideas, get feedback from customers to make sure these things aren't for example, AI for the sake of AI. Why are we doing AI? Well, we're to facilitate decision making. If we're trying to decide how to efficiently use various forms of energy and our systems that are using energy, how they turn on and off and do this, we have tools that'll help humans do a better job at all this. So we're not trying to replace the workforce. We're trying to augment them and improve what they're able to do. And so reassuring them that, leading from the front by inspiring them that this is part of the future and it's okay, and getting everybody on board, especially as everyone's commented on, keeping everybody to understand and support the culture, support the direction that the company's trying to go. I think that's what leaders have to do.
Thank you. So far, yes, we heard a lot of very interesting things, and also some very good examples that I heard, and also some metaphors or similar. Like I really like the octopus, and seriously, but also this is strong in the back and soft on the front for the leaders. One last topic, which is becoming really. I don't know, really everybody think about what's going to happen with this, or problems or not problems. It's artificial intelligence, and basically how do we cope with this? What do you think is going to be the impact? And because we have human intelligence, and it can conflict because human intelligence is also sentient. That reminds me of the octopus. Actually, octopuses are creatures that are way more intelligent than we thought before. They're also a little sentient. So I have personal bias against artificial intelligence, but I guess it's just going to happen. So we have to deal with that. How are you going to use it in your organization? How do you think it's going to affect the way you interact with the people, the way the culture changes, and the responsiveness of also your stakeholders? And these are really big topics. And we've been discussing this also. I work for the city of New York. We looked at how this is going to impact citizens. And this just I want to hear you. I'm sorry, I was starting to talk, and that's not my job today. So who wants to start first? Like I give you.
Gianluca.
Yes. Go.
Great. So I actually agree with a lot of what you were saying there. I think there is a role for both artificial intelligence and human intelligence in this. So if I think about the future energy system, I think artificial intelligence can have a huge amount to play in terms of things like learning and forecasting and running scenarios of how consumers will use energy now and in the future, and also how then energy producers will actually perform under different weather conditions, market conditions, and being able to match those two things up to better manage our energy systems and to make sure it's as resilient as it can be in the long term as we go through this massive transition in terms of the types of energy we're using. When I look at my own space and what my kind of functional responsibilities are within our business, we are dealing with people. We are dealing with communities that are resistant to the adoption of new infrastructure in their area. We're dealing with customers that have problems on their projects and could be relatively animated about that. And that's where human intelligence comes in for me. The benefit of human intelligence is it is more suited to social tasks. It has that emotional intelligence and intuition as well. And so, anyone that's interacted with a chat bot and tried to ask it a complex question will agree that actually the importance of humans is that they can ask other questions to help understand context. They will be careful around the delivery of difficult messaging. They will also think about factors outside of the specific situation that could be applied. And that's something that is very deep machine learning and will never yet go all the way to the way a human can make those tangential connections. So I do believe that there is a role for both. And when it comes to dealing with people, we still prefer people.
Very good. Thank you. Bryan.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to build a little bit on what David said in his earlier answer about artificial intelligence being there to augment human intelligence.
Sorry, 6 minutes left, huh?
Yeah, I'll be relatively quick. So we absolutely agree with that. We don't see it as a replacement for everyone in all circumstances. It's finding the right and appropriate uses for artificial intelligence, using it in a correct and responsible manner, but also understanding the limitations of your model are the limitations of your training data. So a badly trained AI model may look great to start with, but can have some terrible unintended consequences. And also then I'd say that artificial intelligence, the uses are so wide. It's not just one area, one thing. So an example from SSE that we've done in a different part of the business, in the renewables business, was around environmental monitoring and counting puffins on an islet for use as environmental surveys to help speed consenting times for new wind farms. Now, the initial conversations we had with SSE were talking about optimizing wind farms and asset management, but then leading on to using video analytics to do environmental surveys. Also artificial intelligence, but a very different area.
Thanks. David and then Ivan.
Yeah, one challenge with artificial intelligence or machine learning, things like that, sometimes they'll spot a correlation or recommend something, but we actually have needed the human input to understand that that's not just a mathematical observation, that it has an underlying physical reason for that correlation, and then understanding what you have to do to react to that. So training AI systems to be better, to have the human input from time to time, either when they're training or periodically interfacing with them, to tie in that to physical outcomes, physical actions, and everything. And I laughed when Christianna talked about chatbots. I've never met a chatbot I liked, and I've spent hours online with chatbots that I would like to figure out if there's a button I could push that could terminate them. So
you never went to a pub with the chatbots, right?
We got to find a way, because otherwise we're going to turn off customers and they're going to go elsewhere and they're going to make other decisions, maybe wrong decisions. And sometimes we want to give them an opportunity to save money or capture more value, but because we have imperfect interfaces with them, they're not going to capture it. It's going to hurt both of us. So we got to keep working on improving these tools, because they are the future.
Thank you. Thanks, Ivan.
So just very quickly then, so within the testing world, within the testing world, we've been doing automation for 20, 30 years. Some of it well, some of it really badly. Some of it has delivered value, some of it hasn't. So, and we'll have the same challenges with AI. The point I'll make, I think, so I'm going through with my son at the moment, looking at universities. He's looking at IT courses. All of them have AI, machine-based learning, built into standard courses. So the next generation of graduates that are coming through now, that are going to come through, this is normal, this is mainstream for them. And we need to take advantage of it. It's a capability that will free us up, and that's the way we should see it. It's freeing us up to do other things, to do the kind of things that Christina was talking about in terms of liberal, free thinking about how we can grow our businesses and take opportunities. So in my mind, it's mainstream now, and it will continue to be so.
Oh yes, I understand. I have also the metaverse, for example, but like just I'm bringing this because my daughter is like really loves Roblox. I don't know if you know this game, but it's really not much of a game. So we let her do it because no screens, etc. But that's good because it helps you really maybe with future coding, but design things within the space. But what I see, I'm saying this because I see how the native, especially she's 10, how they're so they grew up with this like differently from us and probably more of you. It's just incredible. So I hope also that they will have the ability to discern and how to use it even better than what we're doing now, just because maybe they know it better. I don't know, but that's my hope. So thank you all, because this has been I think very interesting, and it's enriching for me. One of the most important takeaways of any panels in general for me is just the fact that I come out with I know more than when I started, And this has been the case. And you all have brought many good examples, perspectives. I like the practical examples. And I think that there's a general agreement of trying to be prioritizing the human experience. There's one theme. The other theme is want to nudge culture by also leading a lot by examples. The leadership is really, really critical. With that said, I think it gives me some hope because sometimes I'm a little shocked by how some of the technology is being used for evil means. So thank you again, and I'm sorry we didn't have much time for the Q&A, but you've been pretty disciplined, and it's partly, I think, my fault. I should have been stricter, or also with myself. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you, Gianluca. That was brilliant. Don't worry about the Q&A because I think you covered a lot that probably the Q&A covered as well. Some of the people who put in questions for. I think David Hartell's message about the chat boxes. I was actually with one this morning and I couldn't stand it anymore. So I think that is definitely something that that needs to be worked on. I do agree that there's elements of technology that it needs to be refined, and I sort of resonate with what Gianluca is saying. My son as well, they're working on the same. It's the Roblox game, or I don't know, I don't know what they do at school, but it's very similar. So the way they're bringing, I think, the next generation up is is to deal with a very tech world. So interesting that all the courses that Ivan mentioned, that university courses for tech, are with AI in it. I did not realize that, so it's good to know. Very good to know. Just a few takeaways. I think technology, is like what David Hartell said at the beginning. Technology is great, but when you need people to buy into the culture, that's what it comes down to. If you don't have people to buy into the culture, it's completely obsolete. And the same applies to any nice new technology, whether it's machine learning, whether it's predictive maintenance, whether it's a wonderful digital twin. These are fantastic enablers, but if you have not managed the process correctly or appropriately in the company, from a leadership point of view, it's just a waste of time. And I think that that's absolutely clear from technology management. And sort of what was mentioned is technology is seductive because you see all these wonderful things that it can do, but then you actually got to see how it applies to your own organization. Each organization is very different. People are different. And you've got to accommodate that into people, not people into that the technology. And I think that's where a lot of companies have problems with implementation. So, and it should augment people. I think it's a very good comment Bryan Hill made about it's not about replacing people. It's not about getting people to do this job instead of someone sitting there. It should augment people. It should make jobs easier to actually do an enhanced job. So, and obviously being closer to the assets, I think, is something that was mentioned yesterday with the adoption of technology. Also, I like the comment about leadership. I think Bryan mentioned about consistency. Being a consistent leader, consistently leading from the front and actually showing what you're doing and educating everyone in the company what it means to them, because it is about bringing clarity to your co-workers and having a shared ownership. And I think that's really such a great comment that was made, because if the leaders are empowering the ones below them, they're going to want to do what the leaders want them to do. And I think that's what it comes down to. And it also is about relinquishing control, because you've got a very hierarchical way of working in some of these facilities. And I think changing that is not easy. And I respect that. But I think we can't change as a company if you can't relinquish some control, because if you don't do that, everything is always going to go to the top people. Decision making is going to be slower, and it's not really going to solve anything. So there are a number of hurdles, but I think we're getting there. And I think discussions like this make it really, really interesting for people to understand the pitfalls, but the advantages as well of actually bringing in technology. So thank you very much for everyone who contributed to that, and thanks Gianluca for moderating that in a really brilliant way.